software developer for about 30 years or so now. So I don't get to write as much production code as I used to like to. And I've been here
이번에는
for
GitHub
about
copilot
18, 19
워크숍
months,
시간입니다.
So I had a good chance to see this whole community grow up. I'm super psyched to have you all here. I can talk about everything end-to-end GitHub, so if you want to have any sidebar conversations, we can do that while we're working together here, or you can come on over to our table in the expo room after. But I also want to introduce my colleague here, Dave Bernison.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Yep, good afternoon.
Let's try that again. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
There we go. Yep. Dave Bernison, Senior DevOps Advocate at GitHub. I actually work a lot in the enterprise space, talking to enterprises about how to scale their DevOps efforts. And of course, these days, we're talking about the influx of AI with Copilot and things like that. But I also can talk about the whole GitHub stack and integrating with common applications like Jira or Azure DevOps or JFrog Artifactory and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm here to help as we go through the labs here today, go through the workshop. If anybody has any questions, raise your hand and I can come over and hopefully give you a hand.
Cool. Thanks. All right. So that we know why we're here and why we might care, let me give you a real quick, simple demo of Copilot and what we can do with this. I'm going to start by actually just unwinding everything I've done here, because isn't the beauty of AI that we can throw away gigantic piles of code and not have to care anymore? So we're just going to build them all again. Copilot itself, we're going to get a chance to be hands-on trying all of this, but I want to give you an idea of why. If I'm sitting in an application and I've got some existing set of code here, okay, great. I want to add a new function to do something. Let's hop over to this really simple app I've got. Okay, we just built this 10 minutes ago with Agent Node. It's a real estate database app. Basically, I was talking to someone in the industry and said, hey, okay, what are some of the things you want to be able to do? And basically gave Copilot the instruction, hey, I want you to build out a real estate application with a searchable view and a private editing. I want you to have pricing, location, speed availability, etc. from commercial real estate. Oh, and just by the way, populate it with dummy data. Just make stuff up so I have something there. Obviously, if I was actually in the industry, I would have pulled that down and I would have grounded it in something. Took about 3 minutes, and it turned out this full application with its own login page, with the ability to go through, search different properties, find details on each one, that sort of thing, right? But most of the time, what we're doing is not greenfield applications. Most of the time, what we are doing is we're editing existing apps and just trying to make them better, right? We might be going through and refining, changing a bunch of patterns across the code base. We might be doing something as simple as just adding a new function, right? So I'm in a simple app here. All it does is it shows a bunch of haikus and a bunch of dog pictures. It's got endpoints for, hey, I want to get a single haiku. It's got an endpoint for, hey, I want to show all of them. But maybe I want to do something new. I want to say something like, hey, get a random haiku. And I want you to do that by post request. And practically haven't even finished typing the comment line, and I already get a full code completion there. That's a full function that'll actually meet that need, right? But I don't want just any function. Part of the magic of LLMs is that they're taking a look at our existing context and our existing code base and making it better. So, all right, I can see things like, hey, it's using the same template that I do, that index template, as in other functions, etc. I can go ahead, I can accept that change, that code is now mine and I can iterate with. And this is something we're just adding that you won't necessarily see in your versions yet. What's called next edit suggestions. That I just said, okay, I want a way to get a random haiku by post request. What's the very next thing it suggests? Well, you probably also want to get a random haiku by get request. So I'll just tab complete that. okay, I've got a new function, and we could go on for hours like this with it suggesting things that I might want to keep on changing. The other part that is really, really powerful is the chat interaction here. And I want to say one quick thing. If you have played with GitHub copilot in the past, even as much as a year ago, you'll find that there were a number of missing features. There was no agent mode, there was no multi-file edit, there's a little bit harder to control context, but I think one of the biggest ones is a lot of people who started out just used the default model, OpenAI. And OpenAI does some great stuff. 4.0 is pretty good. But a lot of us prefer Claude, some people prefer Gemini, etc. One of the things you get out of the box with GitHub Copilot is this ability to pick whichever model you actually want to use. Now, which ones are going to be visible to you is going to depend on which version you're using, whether you've got the free preview, which we'll be doing today, etc. But one thing I can tell you is that a lot of these things that are marked as preview right now, in not too much time, you'll see them start to trickle out to GA. And you'll just have your option of what models you want to pick at any given time. Personally, I stay in Claude 3.5 most of the time. Claude 3.7 is cool, but it's a little bit slower and you tend to get rate limited. You don't need separate subscriptions for any of these, they all just come with Copilot. So, let's get our hands dirty. Oh, let me not forget to just finish out chat, which is simply that chat you use for lots of mass things. Some of the simplest ones would be something like, oh, I want to create unit tests for this whole file using maybe Supa test, and I've got a file in here with some test data, so I'll just point that out to it and say, hey, I want to use this specific file, iTunes.json as test data, and there we go. It's going to go and it's going to generate a bulk of code for me, an entire test file with all the unit tests I want, that sort of thing. This obviously could have been much broader scope. That could have said, hey, document this whole application, or I could use edits mode and change a whole bunch of files to use a different accessor technique or whatever. But the whole point is that you have a sort of interactive mode here on the side where you can talk back and forth with the LLM. It's context aware. It'll suggest changes to your code base, that sort of thing. And you can choose what to keep and what to undo and unroll. And I can use this for code generation. I can use it for text generation. I can use it for refactoring. I can even use it for just asking general questions. So when you get stuck at some point building your app and you're like, hey, why is this going wrong? I can paste in an error message. I could ask it things after I've created, like, hey, how do I deploy this? I could ask it things like, hey, is this code secure and ready to be deployed? And I can have a conversation on a set of changes with it that are going to fix that up. So with that said, let's skip on to the actual part where we get our hands dirty together. So going to that URL, once again, gh.io/startup-summit-25. What you're going to find here is a repository with some other workshops in it, but the one we're going to be focusing on is the 1 hour version of this workshop. We'll probably actually run a little less since I've spent 10 minutes drawing here. And we're going to step through each portion of this, and I'll come around and help you all out as you got stuck, and Dave will come around and help you all out as you get stuck. If you have a Windows box, Dave is probably your smarter guy. If you're on Mac, I'm there for you. But we'll both try our best regardless of context. What you're going to need, and this is the first thing I want to just get y'all doing, we're going to have this prerequisite section, right? First of all, hopefully you all have a GitHub account. Let me actually see that as a show of hands. Who here already has a GitHub ID? Anybody missing one right now that needs to create one? All right, so we don't need to do that part. Second is you're going to need Visual Studio Code with the Copilot extension installed. And Dave, remind me if you happen to know, I think the latest version of Visual Studio Code just comes with it automatically, doesn't it? It needs a separate install?
I know we were working towards that. Not sure if it's not sure if it's there yet.
All right. So you may or may not find that the second step of this is not necessary, but at the very minimum, get Visual Studio Code installed and running. Just click through that first link.
John, as you said, you might want to zoom in a little bit there.
Thank you very much. Boom, there we go. So just click through this Visual Studio Code link. Make sure Visual Studio is on your machine. Or if you're running a different IDE, just make sure that Copilot's already hooked up. If you're running JetBrains, you can just do a search for JetBrains GitHub Copilot. You're going to find a link on their site for that appropriate plugin, etc. And then, here's some things we're going to need. We're going to need Node.js runtime, and we're going to need a recent version of Python and Git CLI. I will say, technically speaking, you don't have to have the Git CLI. You could use Homebrew to install Git. You might have it somehow accessible. The whole point is simply that if you open up a terminal and you type Git, something useful happens. That's our bare minimum. So let's start with that. We'll take about 5 minutes, help anyone who needs to get set up. Just as a real quick show of hands, so I know how much work we might or might not need to do here, how many folks already have Visual Studio Code or their favorite editor installed? Okay, cool. Of those people, how many have Copilot extension available already? Okay, so that's probably going to be our first step for a lot of folks. And then installing Node and installing Python can take a little bit of work. So we will proceed with that. Raise your hand if you get stuck at any point. Otherwise, we'll just kind of wander around and help people out however they need. Let's get it 5.
Using the what Wi-Fi are you using? The lobby one? Wi-Fi.
I've been using the
Conference there.
yeah, exactly. Right.
Okay.
Cool.
Anybody else not connected to Wi-Fi? Okay.
Oh, yeah, if it's at capacity, I don't know if I have a backup. Yeah, we might just go to cellular,
Okay.
which is kind of a runner.
Okay.
We'll give that feedback to the conference too. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, the back, thanks.
So I'll try and just keep that at the top of the screen as I'm talking.
It says for the bond one? Okay. 10 to 25. Thank you. Yep.
So, yeah, do we want to get the code up, the Wi-Fi
Yep,
code?
I'm going to
All right,
Slack you this picture. So,
love it.
yeah. Should be in Slack now. If you look at
Thank you. I know they don't have the screen listed. Student folks. All right. And while we're doing that, I'll just walk through the couple of things that you might have trouble installing here. Node.js, if you haven't done it before, kind of a deep install. It's all there on the Node.js website. They've got a pretty big download here. Pull that down, run it locally, let me know if you have any trouble. Python, similarly. If you're on a Mac, typically, I don't actually know what the current latest that is. Typically, Python 2 has been installed historically. I tend to prefer Python 3. And you may find if you have both that you just need to nudge the LLM in one direction or the other. I'm telling you explicitly use Python 3 and pip 3 as we're working, if that happens to be your preference. But those should work fine. The Git CLI bit, if you're on a Mac and you use Homebrew, brew install Git, it'll do just fine for you. Otherwise, we've got 4 download links right here. Pick your preference. The Mac GUI works just fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I think if you install that one, it installs both.
I think so. Oh, you're asking about the 2 different extensions, right? Yeah, they should automatically co-install. So the question was, do we need to go out of chat? If you've never installed an extension into VS Code, you can just hit the gear in the bottom left, and there is an extensions link inside that. Inside there, simply type copilot, and after much network lag, you will find a number of different Copilot extensions. Either of these GitHub Copilot ones, whether it's chat or the regular one, they should co-install. If what you're seeing there is a restart extensions button, then do it. You may need to restart VS Code itself after in the context. Let's do a quick show of hands. How many people here are either already set up with the various runtimes and ready to go, or, and this is a fine choice, but you won't get quite as much out of it, or do not intend to go and install those, so I don't need to keep waiting for those. So just give me a show of hands of how many people are ready to move on to the next section. All right, cool, we're at about 50%. If you're not and you're stuck, raise your hand, otherwise I'll just wander around and see if anyone needs help.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you want to just keep going, just having them raise their hand. Yeah, no, exactly.
I can catch up.
All right. The next thing you're going to need to know is just a little tiny bit about how GitHub works if you've never used it before. So, GitHub itself provides, yes, Copilot, LLMs, for programming capabilities, but also sort of everything you might do in the development world, mostly, except for actually hosting your live apps out in the world. Although with Spark, we do a little bit of that too. But the fundamentals of it are code storage and collaboration with other folks, and a little bit of automation and other things. Repositories are the core construct of storing all of your code. And repositories can be cloned. So, you'll see in the getting started here, the very first step, clone the repository and start the app.
이 시간은 GitHub copilot 워크숍
A
시간이에요.
little bit different way. If you haven't come across template repositories before. So normally when you start working with a repository, the very first thing you will often do, just on the main page of the repo right here, if I just click on the code tab, is I would take this and I would clone the thing down, basically copying the repository to my local machine. However, we're going to do something else first here. Template repositories allow us to create a repo in a way that is meant to be duplicated on GitHub itself and make certain changes sometimes as you do those duplications. When you create a repository, you can declare it as a template. And when you do, you get this extra little button up here. So the very first part of this, once you have your local prerequisites, is you go to the home of this particular repo, just clicking the code button, and then click that Use This Template button and pick Create a New Repository. What that's going to do is it's going to ask you, hey, where do you want to put it? And what you're doing is you're duplicating this repository with some minor changes into usually your own personal GitHub workspace, if you will. So you can see here it says owner. 90% of the time, what that's going to be is just your GitHub username. So it's moving into your own private space as a copy. If you have Copilot Enterprise or you're a member of other organizations and you're working today for that organization and want it available to your coworkers or whatever, you might pick that organization as the root. That's up to you. Give it a name. Often, we can just reuse the same name of the repo that we're coming from. I think I've done this once before, so I'll see a collision. Oh, okay, it's actually good. So I'm just going to clone the repository itself with a different name. And you pick public or private, that's up to you. If you make it public, this code will be visible to the rest of the world. So any changes that you make and commit into this repo will be visible to other people. If you make it private, it's just for you and individuals that you might invite as collaborators. You can pretty much leave the rest of the stuff default where it is and just create a repository. Hopefully you've kept a separate window up. Actually, no. Once you've cloned it, you can actually just go right down into content and continue where you were inside the 1 hour workshop. Once we've got the clone down, the next thing we're going to want to do, rather templated, the next thing we're going to want to do is then clone our copy down to our local machine. Why are we using a template first and then cloning it? Because one of the things, you've probably heard the horror stories of people that have been vibe coding along and keep making their changes, and then eventually the code base gets all screwed up and they can't unwind. And that, of course, is what Git is here for. The entire point, really, of how GitHub started and Git as a protocol is we want to be able to have a history of what we did, and we want to be able to back up when something breaks. So by creating your own copy of this template, and then Git cloning it down, you will be working on your own personal version. You can commit your changes up. You can see what changes each time. You can back up if something breaks. So let's go through this. Git clone insert repo here is pretty much grab the root of your repo name. It's going to be something like github.com/pecjon/github-samples. Insert your username here. Head out to a terminal, go to your favorite place, wherever you're happy to keep all of your repositories. Mine is very conveniently named GitHubs, which is done. Okay. Git clone. And drop in the URL there. Very straightforward. You're going to see it's going to copy that whole repo down to your local machine. And now you should actually have a folder with the same name sitting there locally. Take a look at that, just make sure it's there. That said, we're not actually going to operate on the command line for much, but I'm going to start it up. So once I've got it cloned down, you can CD right into that, change into that directory. And then the script you want to run is dot/script/start-app.sh, which is going to run that Flask server, Python Flask server, and it's going to also start up Node. Just to give you a quick idea of how this workshop, how this application is constructed, there's two major folders in it. There's the client folder, which is essentially going to be all of your front-end code, a lot of it's going to be Node. And there is your server folder, which is most of the Python Flask backend, right? When you run that start server script, it's actually executing the full thing. We can see Flask starting up and running here. And then I hit the URL, and we can actually just peek in there and just take a quick look at it and see what's happening there. So localhost 5100. Actually, might need explicitly 127.0.0.1. I probably got something else running on that particular. While I debug that, I'm going to give you the next little bit, and then you'll be able to continue on your own. What we're going to be doing in this workshop is we're going to be firing off our application, and then we're going to open this up in VS Code, and we're going to start iterating through and making changes to the application using Copilot to help us out, right? So I know where that folder is, where I put it. I'm going to go into VS Code, and I'm going to say open folder. And I'm going to go locate that repo that I put in there, and open it up inside GitHub. If you're not seeing a Copilot window on the right, go into your View menu and pick View Chat, and you're going to see Copilot show up on the right-hand side for you to be able to interact with it.
Should have the icon at the top too.
Yes, thank you. Forgot we added that recently.
Yep. Yep.
UI changes.
Yep.
All right, so yeah, you've got this Copilot up there. Don't worry about Copilot edits just yet. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But for now, just open chat, look at this window. If you want to start toying around before we do anything else, you can actually just open up a folder, or even, I think the very first instruction here is simply one of find out what's going on. So you'll see, hey, we talked a little bit about what Flask routes are and that sort of thing. First step, if you don't happen to know what Flask routes are and you don't want to do a lot of reading, you can just ask. It doesn't even have to have a code contest. You can just say to Copilot, what are Flask routes? And you should get a nice explanation back of what those are. All right, so I'm going to come back to debug my own app. Hopefully we're all collectively going to get to the point where we have this repo locally, we're able to fire it up, and actually get that server running. So let's take about 5 minutes and maybe 10, walk around and see if it's able to get that done.
So 5100, the root is not there, but if you go to /API/dogs,
thank you very much. All right, so excellent. I didn't run across this initially when I ran it, but
Yeah, my website's running on actually 4321.
4321. Okay. So let's see. That could be a. Let's see if that's
Yeah,
standard.
it's a different link to see the.
And you were saying /API/docs for yours?
yeah. No, it's dogs, D-O-G.
Oh, dogs. Yes, that makes sense. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so what we're seeing here is actually part of the Flask. Thank you, Dave.
Yep.
The Flask backend server. So the API server, not the web front end. But let's try this. Actually, I want to try this. If I initially had come up and 5100 was just yielding a blank, right? I might go into Copilot and I might ask something like, what URL is the web front end at? Now, in a vacuum here, I haven't given it any context, right? So it's telling me about the Flask app, just because that happened to be the last thing I asked about was Flask. Here's a little tidbit of something you can do with Copilot. Copilot supports drag and drop, as well as several commands that allow me to expand the context. So when I'm trying to ask Copilot about something, you need to ground it, right? We need to tell our LLM what it's actually thinking about at the time. By default, it's going to focus on whatever file I have open. But I don't have any files open at this point, right? So it doesn't even know what to think about. One option would be for me to simply select all of the files on the left and literally drag them into this chat window. And we can see that now my context is populated with all of these files, and I could ask that same question again. Another option is I can simply use the @workspace command. @workspace you can think of as essentially giving Copilot permission to look at all the files in your local project that you're working on, right? So I'll see something like @workspace, where is the web app URL? Or what is? Let's go with that. Otherwise it might just give me a code point. And what it can do now, because I've given it permission, is it can basically look through the whole project and it can try to discover what the most relevant stuff is. So you can see that there's Svelte, but I can't definitively tell you the URL. Okay, but you should probably explore 5,000 and 3,000. So I'd go and I would actually just do that and say, hey, is it responding on either of those? I can almost certainly tell you 3,000 is going to fail on my machine because I was running a separate server earlier. Here's another.
Yeah, there you go. You got Client Astro running on 4320.
We're on 4321. Yeah. Thank you.
That's the front end.
Ideally, I don't even have to discover this myself, though, right? Because I started this on time, sure. But what if I were in VS Code and I brought up the terminal here, and then I said to it that same set of commands, right? I'm already in a directory, so I'm actually just going to go and run that start app, right? So now all of that output is actually available inside VS Code, right? Same output, same stuff. But instead of giving it the at workspace, I can give it the at terminal and ask the same question. What URL is the web front end at? So if I happen to be moving too quickly and missing that output, which Dave's eyes picked up, hopefully what it's going to do is it's actually going to read through this for me. I may need to highlight the terminal content, that might be the problem, and tell me what the actual output is. Right now our model's not behaving real good, but most of the time that would tell me what I needed. All right, so let's take a look at this.
There you go.
And hopefully we've got, tailspin running, svelte, all of that. All right, can I get a show of hands here? How many people have been able to actually get this running and serving locally? All right, minority of people. So let's spend a few minutes, if you haven't gotten to that point and you're stuck somewhere, just toss up your hand, we'll walk around, we'll help you walk on through it, and see what you do with that. Don't be afraid to help your neighbors, too.
The GitHub. Yeah. Actually, replace Pet John. Say GitHub dash samples. Go there. And scroll down, we should see the repos. Pets Workshop. Yep, and then we also have, I think it was gh.io/startup dash summit dash 25 or something like that.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. You're welcome. Yeah, now you know that repo, you can go through this really at any time. And what I learned myself, I've never done hands-on Python development. My colleagues are running on Macs, I'm running on Windows. So it wasn't running, couldn't get Python running at first on Windows. So, it says run this startup script, and it was giving me back an error. So I just took that error, pasted it into Copilot chat, and said, help me fix this error. And it said, oh yeah, this won't work on Windows. You need to change this, and suggested installing Python from the Windows Store instead of going to the Python website and downloading it, because that install actually updates the cache and everything.
Oh, yeah.
So because no matter what I did, it would run through that script, and Python wouldn't run. So I had Copilot.
지금 VS 코드에서 GitHub copilot 익스텐션을 사용하는 방법에 대해서 설명하고 있습니다.
Definitely encourage you, if you get stuck, ask Python. Or I ask Copilot.
For what it's worth, I think the work at workspace very well. Like it did tell me what
What's that?
So it's refusing to execute because there's not execute privileges on the file.
No, I wonder if this
Oh,
nature
yeah,
is so
yeah,
locked
that
down.
could be.
Okay.
All right, well, I don't want to.
Yeah.
If you get a chance, please.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, okay, sure.
No, I was just asking.
Oh, you were asking exactly the same. Yeah. Okay.
Just
yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Property security. Thank you. All right. Anyone else who's stuck at any point wants to assist? All right. No, it's actually shell script. No, I started dash. We should be able to type dot slash start.
지금은 GitHub copilot 워크숍 시간입니다. VS 코드에서 GitHub copilot 익스텐션을 설치하고 AI로 어플리케이션을 개발하는 방법을 배우고 있습니다. 지금까지 VS 코드에서 GitHub copilot을 인스톨하고 제공되는 GitHub 레포지터리를 git clone해서 실행하는 방법까지
There's a
했습니다.
lot of Windows machines that are having some specific access privilege problems and that sort of thing. So, while you may be able to go through and you may be able to run Python directly and execute each of these servers, I don't think we have a
Me plug in and
yeah,
Because
you
I've
got
got-
it.
yeah.
That said, I want to recognize that we've only got about 15 minutes left in the workshop, and most people are not going to be able to self-guide through this in that time. So after Dave does a real quick bit here on how to actually execute those, I'll come back and we'll just do a general Copilot demo so you all know where this can go.
I'm gonna grab my dongle.
I have a USB-C dongle.
Actually, if you can go back to the web, I added an issue
Oh,
that has screenshots and stuff in there.
great. So, one of the many things that GitHub supports is the concept of issues. And issues are basically a bug report or a request for a new feature or that sort of thing. And those are embedded right into the repository itself. So the repository has a code tab, it's got actions, which are automations, code, etc. It's also got an issues tab. In this particular case, the second one, Dave has added an issue describing what the problem is on Windows.
Yep. So yeah, I couldn't get the server or anything to start up. I just actually asked Copilot what the problem was. And Copilot said, oh, since you're on Windows, you need to install Python through the Windows Store because that will complete the setup to put Python on the path and everything. And then we also made an adjustment to the script. So we were working this out about 2 hours ago, to be honest. Oh, sorry, about 2 hours ago, to be honest. But clearly with Copilot's help. So, oh yeah, it's not touchscreen. Okay. Oh, yep.
Usually on Windows, Anaconda or Miniconda is going to work better than the Python app.
Okay. The comment was Anaconda or
Either Anaconda or Miniconda.
either Anaconda or Miniconda will work better on Windows. So, thank you. Thank you. And here I am trying to navigate a map.
else having trouble still getting it running? And, okay. We might have the musicians can do a feature.
Okay.
Walk at this point.
Yeah.
We have my computer with me.
Nice.
Thanks.
I want to make sure it didn't drop off of here somehow.
All right, so that you can then take this and walk away and either complete it at home or do on your own machine, I'm going to give you a basic kind of walkthrough of what you can do with this and the kind of interactions you can have with Copilot to keep this going. So, walking through what you'll see that we're asking it to do is go ahead and make some changes to the existing script. In particular, what we're going to do is we're going to add another route and have it suggest some code. So I'll walk through these quick with you. There's this line, // here, right? # here in app.py. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find that. And in fact, if I'm feeling super lazy, I can just do a global search. If you haven't done this in VS Code, right there for you. Okay. I've got a basic snippet here which hasn't been filled out. If you haven't used Flask, this decorator is sort of like a comment, if you will, at a logical level for the code. It basically says when it's above a function, hey, expose this on this particular web address, and these are the methods that I'm allowed to use to access it. So in and of itself, it's really just a way of declaring something I'm about to do inside the function itself. It doesn't actually implement the function in any way. And so what we're looking for here is Copilot's response, where it actually begins building out the function for us. So I showed you earlier that I could add a comment, and Copilot would begin filling in the rest of the code, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a comment. I can begin writing a function. I can add a decorator. I can put some other information or hint as to what I'm about to try to do. And Copilot is going to simply attempt to autocomplete from that point. So exactly here, what we've got is that as soon as I added that decorator and said, hey, I want something at this address, Copilot looked at the remainder of the application and said, all right, given that, what's probably going to have to happen? I didn't give it a ton of information. I mean, I said it's going to be at an API route, so it's assuming that what I want is an API style interaction, probably JSON. And I said it's going to be /breeds. Now, it knows, from introspecting the rest of the code, that there are dog breeds listed here. And so it simply builds out the dict, goes and gets that from our data store, and then JSONifies the result to give us some output. Let's see if it actually works. No guarantees on that. If I recall, the back end was running at 5,000. Oh, it might have been 5,001, huh?
5,100?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I've got too many things running at the same time here. And if I go to /API/breeds there, boom, there we go. 0 code written. There is exactly the set of breeds available that are in the data store. So the real point there is just, okay, I can have whatever my endpoint needs to be. Copilot go and regenerate that, generate a new function for me, etc. Next, you want to think about, okay, how's it dealing with context? And context is a problem, right? If you just tell something to do something in a vacuum, it doesn't tend to work real well. You need to make sure that you're bringing in the right code and the right places that it can understand. So I showed you earlier this @workspace context. Same kind of concept. As soon as I'm going to do something that's going to be more than local file interaction, just the one file, I need to actually inform Copilot that I need to do something much broader. A few ways I can do that. One is I can literally have the files over here, and I can drag drop them in. I can drag drop individual files as well as entire folders. So for example, if I was about to change something on the back end of this application, I would just pull in the entire server directory to give it that broadened context of those are the places I want you to focus. Similarly, I can use that workspace to describe everything, basically say, here the whole repo. Keep in mind that this is local traversal, and that there's such a thing as having too much context. If I just say, hey, at workspace, do something, I'm essentially saying to Copilot, hey, you should consider and you should be able to edit anything in this entire project that you can see. That's not always what I want. And so to distinguish, okay, if I'm doing something on the back end, I'm only pulling in the server folder. If I'm doing something that's going to be front end and back end, maybe I'm bringing in both of those. If I'm doing something that's also going to need to update the README at the same time to document what I've changed, I'm going to pull that into the context as well. Basically letting it know it can modify. A quick little other side note here. You also have the option, if you prefer to type a lot and be very specific, hash file, and then you can either use a picker here or you can simply type out the name of a file. And you can do that as many times as you want in the context. So I can literally be very explicit about which things I'm using and which I'm not. My favorite thing to do there is what I was kind of describing earlier about making unit tests, right? Unit tests, there's two major things you want to consider, right? One is the files you're actually going to want to create the tests for, but the other is what data do I have that I can test against? In another context, it might be, hey, what file do I want to have pattern this on or something like that. So I might say something like, build a new server using this particular file as a model, so that it's obeying those same set of patterns and kind of I'm coming from, etc. Right? So that's the thing that you can go and you can play with. In this, of course, you'll walk through the actual description of what you're supposed to do here. You're using it at workspace, but don't let that limit you. If you're like, hey, I want to add a new feature to this, I want to add a new capability at workspace, how can I go about implementing this and describe it for you? To give that full context. The other thing I want to mention in the context of that is that most of the time we're thinking in terms of the files that are actually checked in files in the repo, right? But VS Code itself, it's just examining local files. It doesn't matter whether they're actually checked in or not. Technically speaking, I could be working off a USB key on some set of local files somebody's given me, and it wouldn't matter. So I can feel free to, yes, at workspace and reference over the code here, but I can also drag in an external file. Maybe it's a JSON exporting data, maybe it's a CSV, maybe it's the project description from an issue. I might cut and paste the context into the prompt, but I might also just drag in the file as reference. The other thing that this workshop will take you through when you finish it out is Copilot instructions. One of the things that I need to be able to do on a regular basis is I need to be able to give standard information that I'm going to be using every single time, so I'm not having to retype my prompt. For this, you can simply create a new file inside a .github folder called copilot-instructions and put whatever you want in there. My favorite is talk about the pirate. But obviously, I would have lots of other things in here, like check code for security vulnerabilities. I use supertest, etc. Other frameworks you use, patterns you prefer, that sort of thing. Sometimes this takes effect immediately. Sometimes I actually have to restart the environment for it to start. Why not? So what we will see in an application once I've added those instructions is that my responses are going to obey that particular set of Copilot instructions. When you do this in a team environment, what you want to think about is how you as a team are working and propagating your changes collectively into this, right? So for me working alone, I might just be using this as a local file, etc. As soon as I start using this with other developers on the project we're all working on, I'm going to check that file in just like I would any other file. When one of us starts adopting a new pattern, using a new API, whatever it is, we're going to come to an agreement like, hey, something simple as we're going to use tabs, not spaces, for our linting. I'm going to throw that into the Copilot instructions, because then my Copilot is working for me the same way that another person on the team would be. It's obeying our team practices, it's keeping our standards as it suggests code. And that is incredibly important for keeping us all in sync and not fighting with each other as different predictions come from different engines.
John,
Yes,
we're pretty much at.
and we're at time. All right.
Do me a favor. Go back to GitHub samples. Another issue there. It has a bunch of links to resources. So yeah, under issues.
Oh, I'm not in the root one. Apologies.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's that? Under
There
content?
you go. Under issues and then resources. Well, free.
All right.
There you go.
Thank you. So yeah, Dave has added this entire list of resources, which are going to help you out with other places you can find cool stuff on Copilot, where you can go with this beyond the workshop itself. There's a ton of new stuff we've added in the last 6 months or so. One of those is the model picker. Another is the edit mode. And the last that I encourage taking a look at, and come on over to the booth later, and we can give you a full walkthrough of this, is agent mode. So if you're using VS Code Insiders, and you've already done some work with pair programmers and you understand how they work, you can pull down this preview version called VS Code Insiders and switch down to agent mode in the chat box. And that will allow you to do very long-lived interactions, where you can do things like give it an entire description of a program you want to make, and it'll interact with you and go back and forth until you refine that, asking you for permission to continue each step along the way, and doing a great deal of work in the background. So, come on over to GitHub booth after. Thanks for your time this afternoon, and I hope you all have a fun time with this.
Sorry to give you the hook, but
Absolutely. Gotta make room for my folks.
예, 이상 GitHub copilot 세션이었습니다.